The cantina smelled like rusted metal and fermented Grok's bile, a stench so potent even the ventilation systems had given up centuries ago. Mercenaries of all species filled the chamber like a conference of well-armed nightmares. Reptilian death, dealers, bioengineered assassins, psychic war baboons from the Kralos Rift, all gathered beneath a flickering hollow banner that read in 17 languages, "Urgent contract, high pay, extreme risk." Commander Kurztak of the Jar Dominion stepped up to the makeshift podium, his exoskeletal claws clicking together in a gesture of military authority. Half his face was scarred from plasma burns, and he wore medals carved from the bones of his defeated enemies. He waited for silence, though the room never truly quieted. The rustle of weapons and muttered death threats was a given in mercenary briefings. "This contract," Kurztak rasped, "is unlike any you have accepted before. The targets are not warlords, not hive queens, not even sovereign AI warbrains. No, the targets are human operatives." A ripple of unease spread across the room. One merc, a six-armed bruiser with a flamethrower fused to his spine, muttered something about needing to call his lawyer. Another flicked on his translator, implant to make sure he'd heard correctly. "Humans?" asked Dronk of Vesnath, a bounty hunter who once strangled a telekinetic panther with dental floss. "You mean the little pink things that scream a lot and name their weapons after candy? They also cry during mating rituals," added a cloaked assassin from the shadows. "And they invented something called casserole." "Why are they dangerous?" Kurztak gestured, and the hollow screen behind him flared to life. The first footage showed a grainy feed of an elite mercenary squad, armored, armed to the mandibles, creeping through the ruins of a Terran colony on Ganymede 9. They moved in flawless formation, scanning for threats, and then a voice blared from a nearby speaker. "It's raining men! Hallelujah!" The screen shook as explosives hidden inside synthetic lawn flamingos detonated, sending soldiers flying like cheap action figures. The feed cut to static. The second clip displayed an alien death cruiser, the Vraxith Doomblade, descending toward Earth's atmosphere. A human in a bathrobe stood on a rooftop, aiming what appeared to be a household leaf blower attached to a modified blender. 30 seconds later, the cruiser spiraled into the sea, its engines fried by what analysts would later identify as microwaved pickle juice laced with lithium-ion batteries. "They do not follow patterns," Kurztak said flatly. "They do not employ logic. They weaponize ignorance. They turn household appliances into WMDs. They have a cultural artifact called MacGyver that seems to be their strategic doctrine." A holographic bust of a mulleted man with a leather jacket and duct tape appeared. Some of the newer mercs whispered in confusion. Others paled. "Is that their deity?" one asked. "It might as well be," another replied grimly. The room was no longer dismissive. It was attentive. "Who specifically are we hunting?" someone demanded. Kurztak switched the hollow feed again. 4 faces appeared. First, Jack Boomer Daniels, Demolitions. Smiled like a man who'd never read a safety manual and used hot sauce as eye drops. Second, Tyrell Gameboy Jenkins, Hacker. Dreadlocks, neon sneakers, carried a retro. Gameboy duct taped to alien tech with the confidence of a man who once hacked a drone fleet using cheat codes. Third, Darla Mama Bear Rodriguez, Sniper. Tactical precision wrapped in a mom jeans aesthetic, known to bake cookies between kills. Fourth, Rick Conspiracy Rick McMurphy. Unofficial psyops. Carried a briefcase full of tinfoil and kept a list of galactic conspiracies, alphabetized and laminated. Most of them had turned out to be true. The bounty? 10 million credits. Each. A beat of silence. Then a voice broke through the crowd. 10 million credits to fight 4 Terrans? That's death money. interrupted a grizzled merc known only as Kroll. I was on Zenthar Delta when one of them took down a Grav Titan with a bottle of Pepsi and a chainsaw. You ever seen a Grav Titan cry? I have, it begged. Someone else chuckled nervously. That's an exaggeration. Is it? Kroll countered. Because I was hired to eliminate the one they call Boomer. I tracked him to a moon orbiting Kepler 1229b. Took every countermeasure known. I watched him walk out of a cantina, take one look at me, and whisper into his shoe. 2 minutes later, my transport ship turned into a parade float and exploded. To the Top Gun theme. A silence settled over the crowd once more, now tinged with disbelief and horror. Another merc raised a claw. What about standard counterintelligence? Scans, traps? They know, said Kurztak. They know everything. They planted a virus in the MERCnet forums that replaced all recruitment ads with cat videos. Do you know how many aspiring assassins now believe cats are divine warriors? A half-dozen mercs backed toward the door. I fought a Terran once, whispered a lizard-faced assassin from the shrieking nebula. I stabbed him in the gut. He just looked at me and said, "That all you got, pal?" Then he duct-taped a grenade to my forehead. Duct, taped. The fear wasn't logical. It was cultural. It was creeping. These were beings bred for war, forged in black holes and acid rain, but against humans, their advantages crumbled like cheap drywall. Still, not everyone was convinced. A booming laugh filled the chamber. Bozok the Unkillable, 12 feet of cybernetic brutality, stepped forward and flexed for no reason other than dominance. His armor gleamed with fresh skulls. He'd killed 3 supernovas in single combat. Or so he claimed. You cowards fear trickery, he bellowed. I fear nothing. I have slain the bone choirs of Meththak. I defeated the quantum war dogs of Garland. You think I shall fall to beings who microwave fish in office break rooms? Last guy who said that wound up wearing a tutu and serving drinks on a pleasure barge, someone muttered. Bozok ignored him. I accept this contract. I will find these humans, and I will break them. There were no cheers, just a series of retreating footsteps and nervous whispers. As Bozok signed the contract, Kurztak offered a polite nod. You may want to draft your will in advance. I laugh in the face of danger. You'll be screaming in its face if you survive, came the reply. And it will be wearing a trucker hat, drinking a beer labeled Alien Tears, and telling you to hold its Twinkie while it reloads. The briefing ended. Mercs dispersed. Most silently removed their names from the bounty ledger. The Galactic's code of mercenary conduct was clear. No shame in turning down suicide. As Bozok boarded his war skiff, he received a message. A grainy audio clip. Static. Then a voice. Hey there, Bozo the Unkillable, it drawled. Welcome to Earth's greatest game show. How do you like your limbs today? There was laughter. Then music. A kazoo version of Sweet Home Alabama. Bozok crushed the communicator in one hand and growled. Somewhere out there, 4 humans were laughing, and he had no idea that the galaxy had already written him off. Not as a warrior, but as the latest punchline. The desert moon of Janus III boiled under twin suns, the heat shimmering across dunes of fine red dust, and the occasional scorched skeleton of something that once thought it was invincible. A lone structure stood like a misplaced barn from the American Midwest, complete with a porch swing and wind chimes fashioned from spent plasma casings. Inside, Jack Boomer Daniels was mid-conversation with a toaster he had retrofitted into a semi-sentient bomb detector. The toaster beeped 3 times, possibly in existential dread. Boomer smirked, scratched his stubble with a wrench, and muttered, Yeah, well, you can cry about it after you finish diffusing that proximity mine. Suck it up, Toasty. Toasty beeped, once in protest. The door creaked open, sand spilling in as Tyrell Game Boy Jenkins entered. Neon green sunglasses shielding his eyes, a duct-taped laptop slung over his shoulder like a sacred relic. His t-shirt read, "I void warranties," and it was probably accurate on a spiritual level. "Yo," Game Boy said, tossing Boomer a packet of powdered cheese. "Our dear friend Bozok the Unkillable just uploaded a threat video. Very professional. Lots of fire, lots of yelling. Called us mammalian rodents." Boomer cracked the cheese pack open and snorted a little for effect. "Tastes like danger. Smells like expired Doritos. Same thing, really." Game Boy flopped onto a crate labeled "Not a Trap" and pulled out a Game Boy the size of a pizza box. Lights flickered. A turret hidden in the ceiling adjusted its aim and clicked in approval. "Did you get a trace on Bozok?" Boomer asked. "Yeah. Idiot used his real IP address, posted from a cruiser orbiting Gorlak's belt. I could order pizza from that same network. Want to send him a cheese bomb? I was thinking a glitter virus. Make all his ship's internal systems respond in Taylor Swift lyrics. You're evil." I learned from the best. The porch door creaked again as Darla Mama Bear Rodriguez entered with the calm poise of someone who could assassinate a dictator and still make it to PTA by 5. She carried a basket of empanadas in one hand and an antimatter rifle slung across her back. "I heard someone say Taylor Swift and cheese bombs in the same sentence," she said. "Y'all better not be planning another diplomatic incident." Boomer gave her a grin only slightly less reckless than his explosive expertise. "Just a minor response to an aggressive declaration of murder." "You planning to glitter shame the guy to death?" Game Boy lifted a finger. "Emotionally destabilize. Very tactical." Darla sighed, set down the empanadas, and began polishing, her rifle with the same care someone might use on heirloom china. "You boys keep forgetting they're not scared of our weapons. They're scared of the way we use them. Unpredictable, dirty, improvised. Like jazz, but with more screaming." Boomer tossed a screw at Game Boy, who caught it with his teeth. "We should trademark that. Jazz warfare. Now on vinyl." "Focus," Darla said, leveling a stare sharp enough to slice hull plating. "Bozok's not just another bounty hunter. He's been hired by the entire Tsar Dominion. That's not just a hit job, that's politics." Game Boy raised an eyebrow. "You think it's a message?" "It's more than that. It's bait." Boomer leaned back, chair balancing dangerously on two legs. "Then the question is, who's the trap for? Us or him?" Silence fell for a beat. Even Toasty stopped beeping. Then the final member of the crew emerged from the bunker's lower level. Rick, Conspiracy Rick. McMurphy wore a suit made of reflective tinfoil, a cowboy hat with a mini satellite dish on top, and boots scuffed from running through more alien detention centers than he could count. He carried a briefcase labeled, "Definitely Not Alien Secrets." "I found it," Rick announced. "They're not just after us. The Tsar Dominion's under the influence of the Fruit Loop Cabal." Boomer blinked. "Rick, you say that every week?" No. Listen, the mercenary contracts have keywords embedded in the code. Not just any keywords, breakfast cereal references. You ever wonder why they call themselves the Snap Crack Consortium? That's not a translation glitch. It's subliminal food signaling. Game Boy groaned. "I told you to lay off the space caffeine." "You can't silence the truth with logic, Jenkins." Darla raised a hand. "We're wasting time. Bozok's on his way. Dominion ships are probably already triangulating this location. We need options. Fast." Rick opened his briefcase. Inside, maps, intercepted memos, doodles of lizard aliens playing poker. He jabbed a finger at one of the maps. "They expect us to run. That's the trap. But what if we stay?" Game Boy squinted. "You suggesting we home alone, Bozok?" Rick grinned. "Exactly. Old Earth tactics, improvised defenses. Traps they won't see coming because they've evolved past common sense. Boomer stood up, already cracking his knuckles. I'm in. Let's make him earn that 10 mil. Darla gave a slow, dangerous smile. He wants a fight. Let's make it personal. Within the next hour, the base transformed from a dusty outpost into a lunatic's fortress. Weaponized blenders lined the hallways. Door frames rigged with stink bombs and taser traps. A battalion of remote-controlled Roombas armed with stun darts. Game Boy hacked the comm relay to autoblast Bozok's comms with Rick Astley lyrics. Darla took position on the roof, her rifle gleaming under the double sun, while Boomer and Rick rewired the plumbing system to spew synthetic pheromones designed to confuse predator species. Game Boy connected the toaster to the orbital satellite grid. It now glowed an ominous shade of orange and occasionally sang Bon Jovi lyrics in binary. And then silence. The kind of silence that pressed against your ears like a held breath. Through the dust, a shadow approached. Massive. Measured. Bozok had arrived. The warlord stood nearly 12 feet tall, encased in armored plating adorned with ancient runes and fresh blood. His left arm was a plasma cannon. His right held a spiked chain that dripped molten ichor. His face was emotionless, save a gleam of violent anticipation. He stopped 20 feet from the porch, flexing his claws. "Come out, Terrans. Meet your end like warriors." Boomer stepped onto the porch in cargo shorts, aviators, and a shirt that read, "I survived the Great Waffle Crisis of '93. He sipped from a mug labeled Alien Tears. "Sorry," he said. "You caught us during our weekly chili cook-off." Bozok raised an eyebrow. "You jest at the moment of your doom." Game Boy appeared beside Boomer, holding a disco ball wired to explosives. "Bro, you're standing in a field of hyper-pressurized glitter mines. One sneeze, and you'll look like a rave disaster," Rick yelled from inside. "Ask him about the Fruit Loop Cabal." Darla's voice cut through the comms. 3 degrees left, 2 up. I've got his kneecaps if he twitches." Bozok didn't move, but something in his face changed. Not fear. Not yet. Recognition. The kind you get when the punchline finally hits you right before the pie explodes in your face. "I expected warriors," he said. Boomer grinned. "Yeah, you got humans instead." Then the ground exploded, not from Bozok's attack, but from the chain reaction of cheese-based landmines Rick had buried the night before. When the dust settled, Bozok was on one knee, armor scorched, glitter in his cybernetic eye. Boomer stepped closer. "You want to keep playing, champ? Or do we call this round one?" Bozok stood slowly, brushing off his shoulder, voice lower now. "You are unlike any enemy I've faced." "Yeah," said Game Boy, popping gum. "We get that a lot." Bozok stared at them, war cannon humming. Then he did the unthinkable. He turned around and walked away. Not ran, not teleported. Walked, like a man who'd seen something he wasn't ready to admit had bested him. Rick poked his head out. "Is he gone?" Darla responded calmly. "For now." Game Boy leaned back against the porch beam. "So? That a win?" Boomer nodded. "Depends. You think next time he brings friends?" "Probably." "Cool. I've been meaning to try out the flamethrower drone disguised as a lawn gnome." Rick sighed, already unrolling another conspiracy chart. "And I haven't even gotten to the Cocoa Puff protocols." As the suns dipped low and the sand settled back into silence, the humans stood victorious. Not through strength, but through sheer absurdity, relentless improvisation, and the unwavering confidence of creatures who once thought mullets were a good idea. Somewhere in the stars, Bozok re-evaluated everything he knew about war. And back on Janus 3, the humans started prepping for tomorrow. Because there was always another mercenary. Always another challenge. But as far as Earth operatives were concerned, it was just another Tuesday. The message came not as a threat, but as an invitation encrypted within a holographic chessboard dropped into Earth's satellite network like a casual dare. Each piece was a Dominion warship, the board representing known sectors of the outer expanse. The king bore Bazok's insignia, but the real meaning lay deeper. The positioning spelled out Earth's coordinates in jar code. Bazok wasn't retreating. He was planning. Darla read the coordinates 3 times, cross-referencing them against Dominion activity in the past month. The implications weren't subtle. The Dominion was coming, not for a skirmish, not for a message, but for annihilation. What had been a bounty now bore the shape of extinction, and Bazok, humiliated but unbroken, would no longer be the face of it. He was the signal flare. Boomer slid the chessboard onto the workshop table, scattering blueprints and protein bars. So that's it? We're not just targets now. We're bait. Game Boy rubbed his temples, already running predictive simulations on a wall of flickering screens. Bazok's pride got torched in glitter and cheddar. He won't make that mistake twice. He's moved up the ladder. Jar High commands involved now. This isn't personal anymore. It's strategic. Rick adjusted his antenna-studded helmet. They're invoking protocol-cleansing flame. Wipe the site. Salt the ashes. Turn Janus 3 into a cautionary tale. Darla stood at the window, eyes locked on the distant sky. Unless we flip the script again, we don't wait. We hit first. Not just sabotage. We burn their supply chain, raid their listening posts, jam their long-range comms. We make them believe Earth's not prey. It's poison. The silence that followed wasn't of doubt, but calculation. Retaliation on this scale meant declaring Earth's intent to resist openly. No more skirmishes, no more hiding in the cracks. They would be at war with the most feared empire in the galaxy. But in that moment, no one hesitated. Boomer cracked his knuckles. We hit their ammo foundries first. Blow the guts out of their logistics. Game Boy nodded. I'll plant false coordinates. Reroute half their fleet to ghost sectors. They'll chase shadows. Rick grinned. I've been saving a conspiracy for just this kind of thing. The Jar believe in omens. If their own ships start vanishing in cursed zones, their soldiers will panic. Darla turned slowly, her expression steel-bound. We don't win by matching them. We win by breaking their rhythm. Confuse, distract, demoralize. We bleed them until they rethink the cost of war. Within hours, their base was dark. The team split across vectors, each embedded in their role. Boomer left with a pack of demolition drones and a grin that promised nightmares. Rick disappeared into deep channels, seeding falsified transmissions that suggested the Dominion had been infiltrated by its own ancient ghosts. Game Boy tunneled into the Jar quantum networks, redirecting surveillance satellites to record nothing but loops of static and ancient sitcoms. Darla slipped aboard an outdated cargo freighter bound for the Andaran Drift, where Dominion fuel depots powered the front lines. The first explosion came just outside Sector G44, vaporizing an entire ordnance convoy. The second severed the comms array orbiting Jar's northern perimeter. By the third hit, an attack on a black site biolab, the Dominion panicked. They arrested their own officers, executed technicians, scrubbed databanks in blind fear. Paranoia began unraveling the chain of command. Darla's strike on the fuel depot was surgical. She embedded a micro-singularity device inside a shipment of coolant rods. When the rod chamber cycled, it tore a hole through 5 layers of quantum shielding and collapsed the facility inward. The explosion was silent in the void, but Dominion sensors screamed. Each act of sabotage planted a deeper seed of doubt. Jar weren't losing to overwhelming force. They were being humiliated by 4 Earth operatives who made up less than a squad. It wasn't the scale of destruction that wounded the Dominion. It was the elegance, the absurdity, a battlefield where toasters hummed pop songs before disarming bombs, and soldier morale could be shattered by a well-timed cartoon broadcast. It unmoored the Dominion from its image of superiority. Weeks passed in this quiet war. The team operated independently, never staying long in one place, never contacting one another unless it was urgent. Earth's presence grew mythic. Some Jar believed the humans were a hive mind of vengeance. Others whispered of shapeshifters, of ghosts summoned by guilt. Bozok, once humiliated, now stood in shadow, no longer mocked but questioned. He remained, silent, watching from a distant command cruiser as the mythos of Earth swelled beyond containment. Then, the Dominion struck back, not with fleets or fire, but with knowledge. They tracked Darla during a mission in the Avix Trench, using heat signature anomalies to follow her dropship. A squadron intercepted her mid-exfiltration, forcing her into a narrow debris field. She jettisoned the payload, launched countermeasures, but the numbers overwhelmed her. Her ship was pierced, the cabin decompressed, and the last signal Earth received was a 10-second burst of static. Game Boy slammed his fists into the console hard enough to fracture the plastic casing. No, she's not dead. She wouldn't go out like that. Rick scoured Dominion frequency leaks. There's chatter about a prisoner, female, Earthborn, silent. They call her the Echo. They're scared of her. Boomer loaded 2 crates of fusion grenades into a stolen Jar shuttle. His voice was quiet, but there was iron beneath it. Then we bring her home. The operation pivoted. All sabotage ceased. Every asset refocused. No more indirect action. No more slow bleed. The Dominion had taken one of their own, and now Earth's wolves would howl. Game Boy tapped into command signals, mimicking high-ranking Jar traffic to backdoor a location ping. The Echo was held in Dominion Black Prism, an orbital fortress thought lost to time, cloaked in artificial dark matter, its orbit erratic and unpredictable. No blueprints, no escape records. Its existence was rumor until now. Rick patched together what little mythology remained. Black Prism was a prison, but also a crucible. They say it changes people, bleeds them until only obedience remains. If she's in there, they're trying to break her. Boomer responded by disassembling the shuttle's guidance system, replacing it with a neural rig that synced to his reflexes. They're going to learn what breaking actually feels like. The infiltration was surgical madness. Rick manipulated Dominion patrol schedules. Game Boy looped security feeds with avatars that mimicked guard routines down to the blink. Boomer piloted manually through a debris field laced with auto turrets, riding the edge of destruction as if it were a dance floor. They breached the outer hull through a ventilation shaft only used for emergency waste disposal. It was fitting. The Dominion treated its enemies like refuse. The team made sure to return the favor. Inside, Black Prism was worse than myth described. Gravity fluctuated. Corridors twisted in impossible geometries. The air smelled of antiseptic and old blood. Screams echoed, some real, some synthetic. Boomer whispered, "Feels like someone tried to build hell and gave it a budget." They reached the detention block labeled only in glyphs that translated to irredeemable. Darla was there, shackled, starved, yet upright. Her eyes met Boomer's, not with surprise, but expectation. "You took your time," she rasped. Boomer smiled. "We had to make an entrance." They burned their way out. No stealth, no subtlety. Just righteous fury. Game Boy disabled the station's AI. Rick looped the fire suppression systems to drown guard paths in corrosive mist. Boomer strapped Darla to his back and carried her through gunfire and flame. They didn't stop until Black Prism cracked open. Behind them, spilling its secrets into the void. Back on Janus 3, Darla lay in recovery, hooked to IVs and covered in regenerative mesh. The others stood nearby, weapons close. They weren't talking about what came next. Not yet. But in their silence, something stronger stirred. They had been hunted, targeted, reduced to myths and propaganda. but they had endured. And now, the galaxy would learn. Earth did not forgive. It waited. Then it struck back. The mercenary known only as Vark Thorn had fought across 100 systems, his record smeared with crimson glory and soot from countless wars. He was a tactician, a killer, and by every alien metric, a professional in the art of extermination. But this contract had shaken him. It wasn't the pay. The credits were astronomical. It wasn't the target either. A human operative, some ex-spy turned galactic saboteur. Should have been an easy mark. Should have been. Instead, Vark now sat trembling in the depths of a distant moon's cantina, staring into a bubbling glass of synthale like it might contain the meaning of life or an escape clause. Around him, other mercenaries slouched in silence, eyes flicking nervously to the door like they expected it to explode inward. None of them spoke. None of them had to. They all bore the same scars, mental if not physical, from encounters with the same species. Humans. Rumors had started small, always the same shape. Human operatives behaving unpredictably, impossibly surviving, vanishing in plain sight, leaving trails of bizarre destruction. One mission ended when a human used a jukebox to incapacitate a Vorian general by blasting what he called Bohemian Rhapsody at max volume during a siege. Another operative dismantled a bounty droid by confusing it with logic puzzles from a children's math book. Ridiculous, improbable things, but it always worked. Always ended with the humans walking away while the professionals were left in trauma therapy. And now Vark had a name. McKenna. No first name. Just McKenna. The dossiers said he was a former special ops, dishonorably discharged for reasons the Earth Alliance classified into oblivion. His photo looked like every other human soldier, tough, unshaven, cocky. But his eyes weren't dead. They were laughing. Vark had accepted the contract before seeing the mission logs, before hearing what happened on Keras Prime. Keras Prime had been a trap. 5 teams, 24 mercs, and orbital surveillance backing them up. They cornered McKenna in an abandoned terraforming facility. Seemed airtight. He had no weapons, no backup, just a knife and what looked like a lunchbox. 20 minutes later, only 3 mercs were left breathing, and one of them kept reciting lines from a television show no one recognized. The lunchbox had contained what humans called a grilled cheese sandwich and a cassette player loaded with something called Beastie Boys. McKenna had weaponized nostalgia. Since then, the mercenary network buzzed with fear. They'd faced monsters, cybernetic warlords, and entities that feasted on black holes. But none of them had done what McKenna did, made them feel stupid. Not just beaten, humiliated. That was worse. That was unforgivable. Vark's second-in-command, a bug-eyed Tyroxian named Krieg, finally broke the silence. "You think he's coming here?" "He's already here," Vark muttered. "He sent a message." Krieg paled. Quite a feat for a creature with translucent skin. "Message?" Vark slid a datapad across the table. On it, a grainy video looped. McKenna, dressed in a ridiculous Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts, standing in front of a vending machine, stocked entirely with hot sauce packets. He looked into the camera, winked, and said, "Tell Vark I want my $5 back." Silence returned like a slap. The message was clear. McKenna didn't want to kill them. He wanted to mess with them. Break them. And in a twisted way, that made him more terrifying than any assassin they'd ever faced. Because it meant McKenna wasn't just skilled. He was enjoying himself. Across the galaxy, other mercenary teams were coming to the same conclusion. Their communications were littered with refusals, resignations, and panicked demands to blacklist any contract involving human operatives. One squad had tried to track down a hacker named Jenny Rains. She responded by rerouting their dropship into a galaxy-wide karaoke competition, forcing them to perform Ice Ice Baby on 10 different worlds before she let them go. This wasn't war. It was psychological theater. Back in the cantina, a shadow passed over the table. Vark and Krieg tensed, but it wasn't McKenna, just a delivery bot carrying a small crate. It dropped it at their table and rolled away. Krieg eyed the box like it might explode. Vark, with a grimace, opened it. Inside was a single item. An ancient VHS tape labeled Die Hard. Vark swallowed. "We're done." Krieg didn't argue. Neither did the others when Vark announced over the cantina comms that the bounty on McKenna was being declined. Formally, indefinitely. The Galactic Mercenary Guild issued a universal advisory: human operatives off limits. Not worth the trauma. Not worth the therapy bills. But even as they retreated, McKenna remained. Somewhere out there, in the shadows of crumbling worlds and forgotten battlefields, he was waiting. With his mixtapes, his sarcasm, and his impossible luck. The galaxy was vast, but it wasn't big enough to hide from the embarrassment of being outsmarted by someone who quoted 90s sitcoms while defusing bombs with chewing gum. And so the legend spread. Children whispered about the human who couldn't be caught. Soldiers toasted to his madness. Mercenaries checked under their beds not for monsters, but for a smiling human in retro sneakers, humming the Fresh Prince theme song. McKenna had become something more than dangerous. He was a myth, a warning. And in the deepest corners of the universe, mercenaries told new recruits the same thing. You can fight beasts, you can face machines, but if the bounty says human, walk away, because one day you'll open a door and he'll be there, grinning, holding a boombox, and your nightmares will have a soundtrack. The galaxy was still at war. Empires rose and fell. Technology advanced, but the fear remained. Because McKenna had proven the most terrifying truth of all, humans didn't play by the rules. They rewrote them, usually in crayon.